Welcome to Laguna Woods Stories. We have a most interesting guest today. This is Jeff Parker, who is the CEO of Laguna Woods Village, and we will find out a little bit later from Jeff just what that means. But first, let's delve into your past a little bit and just find out where you came from. You told me earlier that you grew up on a ranch.
That's correct. I spent my youth up until I went off to college in the Santa Paula Ventura area on a very large citrus ranch. My dad was superintendent there, and so I learned all elements of being in the citrus business and land crops too as well.
Okay. And so you drove tractors and all?
Tractors and raised cattle and did all kinds of sorts of things as a kid.
Mm-hmm. And what did you particularly like in school?
Well, I was a big sports advocate in the sense I probably tried to play every sport I could, so I loved that. And then history was probably my favorite subject in elementary school and high school. And then I found government after that.
So studying history kind of led you to an interest in government.
Yep. And I was thinking about, when I went to college, about potentially going to law school, but I focused on political science and local government, and so I started my career in local government once I was working on my master's degree.
So you were pretty clear from the get-go as to where you wanted to end up.
Yeah, once I got my master's degree and started working in local government, which was fascinating to me, I realized that was where I thought I could do the best good, and so I focused on local government as opposed to working at the state or national level.
And local government meaning city government, I suppose.
City government or county governments, but in my case, all city government.
And what city?
Well, I've worked in several across the state of California. My first one was in West Covina as an internship, and then started my full-time career in the city of Poway in San Diego County, and then worked kind of up the state. I went from Poway to San Juan Capistrano, so I was here in Orange County for about 5 years. And then I got my first city manager job, actually in Northern California, Central California, for a small city of Patterson up in the Central Valley.
So you worked for several city governments, and then you, was it a move up into a county government? Or?
No, I continued in that track. So I moved back to Southern California, and I worked 3 cities there. The city of Walnut in San Gabriel Valley, and the city of Claremont, San Gabriel Valley. And then had my last city that I managed was the city of Tustin, just down the road here in Orange County. And I was there for 7 years, and then was looking at retirement, and retirement led me to the village here.
I see. How is what we do here in the village similar or different from working in city government?
I think there's a lot of similarities in the sense of managing operations and managing people and being a leader. And a change agent, or trying to create a new culture in your organization. I think those are very similar skill sets that the local government would have and that you would have here with the village. The differences that are significant is the governance structure.
Yes.
Clearly here with the village and the HOAs, we're governed by the David Sterling Act and the civil code relative to that, whereas city governments have the government code that is their legal binding instrument. So those are probably the biggest areas. And here, with that government structure, we have, as you know, the HOAs of United and Third, and GRF. And
in fact, I made a little graphic of the kind of a simple organizational chart, and at the top of the chart, I have the members.
Exactly.
All 18,000 plus members, and so the ultimate power is with the members.
Right.
But we show our power mostly by electing the board members.
Correct.
So the next thing on our chart here are the boards,
That's correct.
And we have such a large number of boards because we have the various housing arrangements that each has its own board, and then we have the Cold and Rain Foundation, GRF.
Right.
And the board set policy, and then the boards hire village management services, VMS.
Correct.
And VMS hires you, am I right?
Right. That's exactly right.
All right.
And so I report directly to the board of directors of VMS, and then I work closely, obviously, with the other boards to accomplish what they have as far as their goals for the year.
And I think it is often confusing to people that where do you make input if you don't like the way the gardening was done? Do you go to one of the boards?
If it's an operational issue, then I have direct management responsibility over that. So if it was an operational activity such as gardening or our transportation system, then I have the direct responsibility in overseeing that with my directors and my staff people, and we manage that. With regards to the key part, which is the policy that you have up there from the boards, they're setting the policy as to what direction we want to go with our transportation program using that, or how do we want to develop future programs. So my job is to coordinate both ways, find out what the boards want and need and what their directions are. Which
is a moving target.
Which is a moving target sometimes. And then implementing that through a great staff that we have.
The boards set policy, so if you don't like the speed limit, for example, don't call your office, right? Because those considerations are set by the boards.
Right, and so what we do is if somebody was concerned about something like that, they would probably contact us and contact our security department.
Right.
And then at some point in time, they could make a request to the board to evaluate that decision or that policy.
So they could start with you, but you would pass that on to
right. And then there's committees.
Board. Yes.
And the boards have a lot of committees, and they would probably send it to a committee to take a look at it first, and then give the board a recommendation.
If somebody felt that they were wrongly arrested, they thought they were unfairly treated by security officer, they wouldn't take that to the board probably.
They could go a couple of directions there. They could certainly go directly to a board if they wanted to, or they could go to our compliance division. And our compliance division does a review of the complaints, and they write up a report, and then if it's necessary for the board to get involved, they have hearings in front of the board.
These things happen regularly, I presume, so there are well-established channels for
exactly. I think that's one of the things that works really well here is that there are a lot of deliberatory processes involved, and they're pretty well defined as to going to committee, then the committee up to the board, or going directly to staff and then the staff implementing it.
How much of a learning curve was it for you coming from city government into this situation?
I think the biggest thing was understanding the dynamics of the boards and their roles. As you said, we have the mutuals have their boards and GRF has their boards. So
when you say the mutuals, you mean the
two
housing,
HOAs, right? The two HOAs, United and Third.
Right.
So there's 33 board members just for those three elements, for United, Third, and GRF, and then VMS has 9. So you're really working with an authority package of 42 board members. Whereas coming from a city, it's 5 or 7 or 9 council members.
City council.
City councils. And so the coordination's a broader perspective, and the individuals on those boards come from different perspectives. So it's trying to get them to work together and make sure that their policies that they're setting is really where they want to go.
There's interaction because between the boards and the management company, because the board may come up with a policy that's unworkable.
Well, and in that case, certainly our VMS board is notified by me, and I say, hey, this is one that is going to be hard to implement from a staffing point of view, or we can't implement it from a staffing point of view. So then that's where the dialogue becomes important between the board members and the presidents meet on a regular basis. All three of the GRF, United and Third, along with the VMS president, they all meet together on a monthly basis, and they go over major topics that they're dealing with. And then for me, on a practical point of view, I meet with all of the presidents individually. And they usually bring their vice president along with them. And I have one-on-one meeting with them to make sure that VMS is following through on their priorities.
Back to our organizational chart for a minute. The next step on the chart is you.
Right.
And so just let me point out that in the top level we have 18,000 plus members, and then we have, I think you said there are 33 board members.
Correct.
So the power gets a lot more concentrated there, and then that goes to Village Management Services, which is a corporation with a board of 9.
Right.
And then you're all by yourself in it. Well, is it lonely up there?
It may look that way, but I'm very well supported by a number of directors.
Yes.
We call directors and department heads, basically. And so I have a great executive team that supports our operation, VMS's operation, and myself. I have a COO, which is Chief Operating Officer, who's my right-hand person, I will say, and Siobhan Foster, and she does a fantastic job of keeping our organization in line and helping support me in getting things done. So doesn't feel too lonely up there.
Okay.
I think that sometimes there is probably more emphasis than necessary that there's just one person. It's really not. It's really a team effort to get things done.
Okay. And to pretty much whatever extent you wanted to be a team.
Absolutely. That's a big deal for me. I'm much more of a delegator and somebody who believes in putting the right team on the bus and get the organization going in the right way, and then letting them do their jobs.
Give us a little sense of the scope of this organization. Roughly how many employees does the village hire?
We have over 850 employees.
850
and
employees.
That's both full-time and part-time. So it's a pretty large organization, and it's unique compared to local government, because when we are operating in the mutuals, we are doing things like plumbing and electrical, things that the private sector would be doing in a city type of environment.
So that would have been a change.
That's definitely a change. So how to manage that process and making sure that we are getting things done on a timely manner and getting things done right, obviously. So that's a critical element that is unique to the village. It's interesting, and it's been an enjoyable process of learning how that operates.
The boards have a lot of power, but they don't really have the ability to spend money, hire people, really accomplish very much without VMS.
Yeah, we basically are their agent to get things done. It used to be PCM and they were a professional management company, and then the decision was to kind of internalize it and go within, so kind of a self-internalized management group. But it's still the same operation concept. You have to have the employees get the work done. And that's why it's so important that the policy is generated by the boards, as you say there, so that we can follow the policy and get things implemented. What are the priorities?
Give us a sense of your overall budget, annual budget.
Well, it's over $100 million when it comes to everything capital and operational. It's over $50 million when you're talking just operational, and then the capital side of it. It's a very large budget. I always say it's kind of like a mini city in and of itself, and in some cases, it's bigger than a lot of cities from the manpower and the expenditures and the operation that it goes through.
How does this budget compare to kind of a medium-sized cities?
It's pretty close to the same. The budget in Tustin was almost identical to this. It varied a little bit on the capital side. Cities, especially in the city of Tustin, which was still growing and stuff, had a little bit larger capital budget, or operational wise. The uniqueness here is we don't do public safety from the sheriffs. We use, the sheriffs are our neighboring element, and they protect us from that perspective. And we don't have fire. In Tustin, we had our own police department, which was different.
Right.
So that increased their budget versus ours.
And that sort of brings up another area relevant to governance here, and that is the village is a separate entity from the city.
Correct.
And so part of your responsibility, I suppose, is to work with the city, and how does that work?
Laguna Woods is managed by a city manager and a council form of government. Chris Macon is their city manager, and Chris and I have a really good rapport. We've known each other from the profession before I jumped over here, so that helped.
Very good.
So that connection's pretty strong, and certainly some of the council members, or most of the council members, if not all now, live in the village. So they know the village. They know what's important to not only the village but also the community of Laguna Woods.
The village is some big percent of the city.
It's over 90% of the population.
There's a little bit of population in the city outside of the village, but
just a small,
but not much. Our media here within the village would be somewhat different than what you'd have in a city, I suppose, in that we have our own television channel and all of that.
Right. That's probably another area that I'm trying to develop more usage of too. Is although it's been a great resource for our members, and they get a lot of information on there, I think we can do an even better job of media and communication. So one of the things we did this year was we actually created a department specifically for media and communications. And Eileen Paulin, who I know you've met,
yes.
I promoted her up to director of that. And so she's now overseeing kind of not just the media side that we were doing, or the communication side, but she's now handling management of Channel 6 and the whole TV production. And that is going to be a tool that we hope that we can continue to increase and advance in working with the organizations like yourself to get more information out to our members.
Oh, good. Can you tell us what your thinking is as to how this could be eventually developed?
Well, I think there's a couple areas. I think we can do more PSAs and work. We've talked about the video club helping with PSAs and getting more of those on the channels so that people can see that. One of the things that I've started is what we call a community forum with the CEO, and we're going to go out kind of every other month schedule and have meetings where we're just going to open it up to we'll do a small presentation on what's going on in the village, what we're focusing on, such as landscaping or transportation, and then we're going to open it up for a dialogue with the community members that want to show up and talk to us, because I think that feedback is what can enhance that communication.
And will that be televised?
Probably won't be televised. We're going to do it in Clubhouse 1 primarily. We'll move it around a little bit. And it's, like I said, it's open to everybody that can show up. We've had one already. We had one a couple weeks ago. Probably had about 50, 60 people show up. That's great. I think we can get a few more. We're getting the schedule out. We just want to invite people to come and listen. We'll also have board members there, because one of the things at the first meeting that we found out was a number of members wanted to hear or see or talk to the board members from
Right.
the separate HOAs. So we're going to incorporate that into it. I think the other piece of documentation that we just recently completed was we're doing a new hard copy Village Breeze.
Oh, yes.
And that it's about 64-page
A beautiful
mailer,
beautiful
hard
magazine.
copy that's being mailed to everybody in the village. So everybody should get a copy as soon as we get all the tweaks with the U.S. Postal Service squared away. But look forward to seeing that in your mail if you haven't. But if you've gotten it, I hope you take a look at it. And a lot of documentation in there, a lot of information, and we're going to incorporate different departments' information in there so that we can consolidate and hopefully save cost into it.
I understand that that's going to come out every other month.
That's correct.
In the future, the first magazine was a beautiful effort.
Great. Thank
Applaud your people that did such a great job on that.
They did. Elise and was in our staff was like one of the key staffs in putting that together. Of course, with Eileen and her management, it came out really well.
It was beautiful. What are some of your other desires, dreams for how this community might grow and develop?
Well, I think the challenge going long term is to try to figure out how we're going to maintain or enhance the structure and the nature of the village in the sense of its uniqueness, in the sense that we have so many different clubhouses. We have the golf course, we have the tennis facility, we have the pickleball. We have so many different activities at the clubhouses.
Right.
And that's kind of the heart and soul of why people, I think, move to the village, is it's an active community and they want that. Yeah. And we need to maintain that and enhance it if we can. And that costs money. So, the real question is, how do we come up with a good structural infrastructure plan, or financial plan, as I call it, so that we can have financial accountability and sustainability at the same time moving forward. This isn't just a one-year plan. This is 5, 10, 20 years out. How do we set the stage so that when it's time to rebuild a clubhouse or redo a clubhouse, we're adequately financed and we can accomplish the goals that the community wants? And the membership's going to tell the boards what that is, I hope.
Very shortly coming up, there's a remodel of the Clubhouse 3, the Performing Arts Center. Tell us about that. What's happening there?
Well, there's two major elements that are going on, and the first one is the PAC. We call it the PAC, Clubhouse 3. Is in need of some structural improvements in the sense of air conditioning. The HVAC system is very old, it's antiquated. And when I say that, if you were to go in there and you're using one of the side rooms that's small, the whole thing's being air conditioned, though. The theater's being air conditioned, everything.
So the whole building's under one system.
Right.
Inefficient, I presume.
And very inefficient. And so the new HVAC system will be segregated so that we can air condition part of it when we need it, part of it when we don't need it, and that's going to save us money and be much more cost effective when we run it. The other thing is the internal elements of the theater itself. The rigging and the equipment and the curtains and those are needing of upgrades for public, just for health and safety of not only the people using it, our employees that are maintaining it. It's gotten to the point of obsoletes in some of the critical elements, so we need to replace that for safety reasons. So those are
on the stage in particular.
So those are the real big two elements. So when they look at this first phase, it's really about health and safety issues and improving the environment there in the sense of making sure that we have ADA requirements with regards to bathrooms are set up appropriately, and that the improvements are made so that we run it more efficiently.
There's been some talk about considering remodeling Clubhouse 1. Anything happening there?
We've done an initial study to take a look at what it would cost, and what kind of size of a remodel we'd want to do.
It's such a big and sprawling.
It is clearly our biggest square footage area of a clubhouse from that perspective. So the first element was to just get an architect involved in looking at conceptually what it would take to just maintain it at a quality where we don't run into any health and safety issues, and what that would take. And then the second look was we have a couple buildings, all secondary buildings around it that are part of it, that are in the back where the archery is the shuffleboard is.
Right.
Those two buildings have structural elements that we think over a period of time are going to continue to get weaker and weaker, and so we're looking at whether those need to be replaced, and what would we want to put there to replace it? What kind of a building activity? So those were the first two. Then the third one was, well, what if we realized that how we're operating it isn't how the members want anymore? Let's assume they didn't want archery anymore, didn't want bocce ball anymore, that they're moving towards more activities like pickleball, or they want more room in the gym. So we then
there's still some shuffleboard around, and not as many people playing shuffleboard
right,
anymore.
Exactly. So what is the best use of it? And if you go into Clubhouse 1, the big room that you enter in at the very end is a very, very large room, can hold a lot of people,
right,
but isn't necessarily real efficient if you don't have that many people. So if you only have 100 people, well, you could have 3 rooms full of 100 people instead of one big room. So trying to figure out whether we want to come up with a system where we can basically accordion off the rooms and create more efficiencies there. And then the third option or fourth option was literally what if we tore it down, because the buildings are old and they're getting old. What would be the possibility if we tore it down, started all over, and what would be the economics of that? And so we're just starting that evaluation. That's certainly a lot more expensive than all of the other ones that they've looked at.
I know when Clubhouse 2 was remodeled, there was a huge discussion. This was before your time, but a huge discussion as to whether or not they should, scrape it and start again, or remodel it. And they decided to remodel it. I think a lot of people think that was the wrong decision. But
well, one of the challenges you have was when you get into remodeling it nowadays, you have so many new state regulations on building codes and requirements that oftentimes what you think you're going to spend on that remodel becomes twice as much. And I think Clubhouse 2 ran into a little bit about that. So that's where
they found rotten beams and no foundation in places, and
so
all kinds of issues.
Exactly, and when you get into that, you end up spending more money than probably if you would have started clean.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing with us today. Our guest has been Jeff Parker, who's the CEO of Laguna Woods Village, basically, more specifically VMS, the management company. Thanks for sharing with us.
You're welcome.